Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Braided Hearts Wirework Bracelet. And you can make so many different variations of this design. I have a few here that I made just to show you some of the possibilities. And these will also be available for sale in my shop along with other jewelry kits and tutorials. But if you want to learn how you can make your own, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. First of all, the wire that I'm using is a regular round silver coated copper wire, and this is a 1mm gauge. And the beads will need a 4mm rounds. Now the specific ones I'm using are some hematite gemstone beads, and I've got blue colour and rose gold colour. But you can of course use whatever colours you want to, or just the one. What you just want to make sure of is that the holes in the beads you're using are large enough to take the wire through. Now if you have some beads where the holes aren't quite large enough for the 1mm, you can always take the wire down to a 0.8mm. And then we need our findings, so I'm using a Lovestock claw clasp and extended chain along with a couple of jump rings to put it together. Now you can of course use whatever kind of clasp you prefer, or even make your own. And then the tools we're going to need are first of all some flush cutters here, so we can of course cut our wire. Chain nose pliers to help manipulate the wire. I'm using 6-step bell making pliers to make loops with. Of course you can use round nose pliers for this. And to hold on to the wires while we're making the braid, I'm using this spring clamp. Now like usual, you'll be able to find the material list and useful links in the description box below the video. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. Then we need to cut some lengths of wire that we can work with. So I have 3 lengths here of the 1mm of about 30 centimeters each. And then I'm just going to make sure all the ends are together so they're even. And then I'm going to grab my spring clamp and make sure to put the ends into it here. And just leave a few centimeters of the end of the wire free before we then start braiding with the rest of them. So this is now my starting point and I'm ready to start braiding. Now what we're going to be doing is a regular 3-strand braid here. So I'm just going to separate them out a little bit first of all. And I'm just going to start making a few movements in the braid without any beads to begin with. So I'm just going to start with the right side, bring that right one over the middle one, and then that becomes the new middle one. And then just bring that previous middle one out to the side. And then what I like to do is, because obviously this is wire it reacts a bit differently than say cord or something, I like to push down the wire that I just moved. So it's going away from the others a bit and kind of downwards towards the back. Then I'm going to bring the next wire that I'm going to move. So in this case, the left one comes over that middle one and now becomes the new middle one. And then I bring the wire that I kind of pushed downwards back up so they're all level with each other. And then I just want to repeat. So I push the one I just moved downwards a bit, and then I bring the right one over that and into the middle, and then just straighten it back out. And that just makes the braid a little bit tighter. And then I'm just going to do a couple of movements, like I said, with just the wire here. So you can see we're actually starting to form the braid up there right at the beginning. And I also like to always keep straightening out the wire as I'm working with them, because they can get misshapen by the warmth of your hands and fingers. So just keep straightening them out as you go. And then I want to start adding in my beads. So the next wire that I'm due to use is the furthest right one, because this is where I have 2 wires next to each other and the other side just has the one. Then I'm going to first, before I move anything, add a bead onto that outer wire that I'm going to move next, and just let the bead drop all the way down. Now I'm not bothering pushing down the wire that we're going over when I'm adding the beads in, because it's not really necessary. The bead is going to act as a stopper. And then just bring the wire over that middle wire and into the middle to become the new middle wire. And then that bead is going to sit right there in that little corner and just fit in perfectly. And make sure to smooth your wires out. So now we have 2 wires on the left, which means that's the next side we need to move. So the furthest left wire I need to move, but before I do, I'm just going to add a bead and let it drop down. And then I'm bringing it over the middle one and into the middle. And again, just making sure that that bead gets stuck right in that little corner, and straighten out my wires. And then we got part of the hat, we're just missing the last bead, and I'm going to add that bead onto, again, the furthest right wire in this case, because that's the next one that I'm due to use. So bring that over the middle one, so that becomes the new middle one. Smooth out your wires, and there we have our first little hat. And now what I'm going to do is again a few movements in the braid without beads, because I want a bit of spacing between each of the hats. So now that means, because I'm not adding beads in, I like to just push down that middle wire before I bring the next one over and into the middle, and then straighten it back out. So that was one movement after the last bead, and then do the opposite side. the next movement. So that's the second one. And now it all depends on how you want yours to look. So if you want them to sit in opposite directions, for instance, you could add your next bead here and then do the same thing, add a bead in the next 3 movements, and that would give you another hat but facing in the opposite direction to the first one. So if you want them opposite to each other, you can add another one now. Or if you want it to face in the same direction, I'm going to make one more movement. So bring the outer one over into the middle, and that's the third movement. Smooth out your wires, and I'm now in position for the next hat that I want to add, because like I said, I want mine to be in the same direction. So before I do any more movements, I want to add my bead to the very outer wire, the one that I'm due to move next. And also in this case, I'm using a different color of bead, but obviously that's completely up to you, just to kind of make them stand out from each other a little bit. So bring that outer wire with the bead on over the middle one. And that bead is just going to act as a stopper and sit in that corner just perfectly. And then I'm adding a bead to the outer wire on the other side. Bring that wire over and into the middle. And you can see we've almost got the full hat like we did with the first one. We just need to add our last bead, let it drop down, and bring that over and into the middle. And that is the last bead in this little hat. And you can see we've also created a spacing between them. And then now I'm going to make some more movements in the braid without beads, just like before. So that's why I'm going to push the wire down, bring the outer wire over that and into the middle, straighten them back out, and repeat. And again, in this case, because of the spacing that I'm doing and I want it to be even, I'm going to make 3 movements here without beads. That was 2, and then the final one over and into the middle, straighten everything out, and then I'm in position to add my next bead, which will be, in my case here, the blue ones. And you just want to keep going like this, or like I said, of course, if you want to alternate the direction of them, you can do that as well. So you can really customize this to however you want it to look. So I now made the length that I need here, bearing in mind the clasp is going to also add some length to the bracelet. So what I'm just going to do is show you how to finish off the end here. I'm just going to be making loops on either end where I can then add my clasp to. So I have 2 wires on one side and 1 on the other. That's how I've ended up. And what I'm going to do is take the single wire, and it's coming under the middle wire there. So I'm just going to bring it back over the top of that middle wire and basically wrap it around that. So I'm just coming down between the 2 so I can wrap around just that middle wire by itself. And I'm just going to do it a couple of times. So around again there. You can see I've got 2 wraps, make sure they're nice and tight. You can always use pliers to tighten them if you need to. Then I'm going to take my flush cutters, go in and cut off the excess. Get rid of that end. And then just make sure to squeeze down the end so it's not sticking out from the wraps or anything. Flatten that down nicely. Then I have the other length of wire here on the other side that hasn't been used yet to finish off with. I'm going to bring that over the top of the same original middle wire there. That's got a wrap on it now. And then I'm going to wrap this around as well, but right above the wraps that I just did before. So wrap it around a couple of times as well, just like that. Make sure they're nice and tight. Flip it around, cut off the excess, get rid of the end. And again, just make sure we squeeze down that end of wire so it's not going to catch or scratch on any skin. And now we're left with this one length of wire. So I'm just going to take my pliers and straighten it out so it comes straight out from the end of the bracelet like that. And then from here I'm going to use that to make a loop with. So I'm just going to go above the wraps there a few millimeters, and I'm putting it sideways. Then I'm going to put a bend into it like that. Take my 6/8 bell making pliers and I'm just going to use the smallest step there, and then just bring the wire back around all the way so we end up getting a full circle like that. Then I take my chain nozzle again, put them on the circle so it keeps its shape, while I then take the end of the wire here and wrap around below the circle and fill in that little gap that we left. And again, make sure that these wraps are nice and tight so we secure it in place, but also make all of it blend together. And then flip it around, cut off the excess, and then just make sure to also push down that end so you can't feel it with your finger when you go over it, because that way it shouldn't catch or scratch. So there, now we have our loop, so you can easily attach your clasp to that. Of course, you just want to flip it around and do the same thing on the other end. Then all that's left to do after attaching the clasp there and extend the chain is to shape it. So you can shape it around something that has a size and shape like a bracelet mandrel, or you can use your hands and fingers. So go into a place and start putting a curve into it. Don't just make a big bend that'll make it out of shape, but just gradually make a curve back and forth So we end up getting the two ends closer together, so we can of course use the clasp. And I personally like to make it more of an oval shape rather than round. I feel that sits better on the wrist. And then when we have the two ends close enough together, we can use our clasp and the bracelet is finished and ready to wear. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this Braided Hearts Wirework bracelet, and the combinations of how you want yours to look are really endless, so of course you can play around with that. And if you like braided wirework, I have a whole playlist full of different tutorials with braided wirework in it on my channel, so you can check that out. There'll be a link in the description box down below. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.